Well, for more than a month now, our fugitive squad has been working to find and to capture Davon Wallace, and today we are pleased to say that the search is over. I'm going to walk you through the lineup for today's news conference. We'll begin with Chief McGaw, and that will be followed by Major Rob Brewer. He oversees our Special Investigation Division, and then we'll bring up Major Cesar Pacheco, who is in charge of our Criminal Investigation Division. That will be followed by Knijah Bibb, that's Knijah Bibb's mother, as well as Brenda Bibb, Knijah Bibb's grandmother. We'll begin with Chief McGaw.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. There are a few things, very few things, that can rattle a major police department. The senseless death of a child is certainly one of them. For 38 days, we've been searching for Davon Wallace. We have him in custody, and he's right where he needs to be. Wallace's reckless, cowardly actions took the life of a young, innocent baby girl. It's inexcusable. What's important to know for our citizens is that the outpouring of support and help from our citizens helped us find Wallace. Our fugitive squad worked around the clock, and I want to thank our community for all their support. I also want to thank our federal partners, specifically the FBI. They've worked day in and day out with us in this case for the last 38 days. Steve Votis here, the SAC from the Baltimore Field Office, and I want to thank him personally for the help of the FBI. Lastly, to acknowledge our detectives, our fugitive squad, and our commanders who spent countless hours working on this case. There is nothing that this department cannot do. And if you're going to come to Prince George's County and commit a crime, we will find you and we will bring you to justice. Knijah's family now has to face life without her. As a father of 4 children, I can't even imagine that. It's our sincerest hope that Wallace's arrest provides some level of comfort to her grieving family. Thank you.
Now, Major Rob Brewer, who oversees our Special Investigation Division.
Good afternoon. Like Ms. Parker said, I'm Rob Brewer. I'm the commander of SID, which has part of it, the fugitive squad. Like Chief McGaw mentioned, over the last 38 days, the fugitive squad has spent thousands of hours looking into different resources and avenues to apprehend Mr. Wallace. They went to in excess of 50 addresses and interviewed dozens and dozens of people reference this case. Their interviews took them as far north as New Jersey and as far south as North Carolina. In addition to the FBI assisting us on this, we added additional resources in-house and transferred some people temporarily into the fugitive squad to assist them with additional manpower. And those resources, it worked out that we were able to catch Mr. Wallace this morning. Over the course of investigation, the fugitive squad took this case very personally, as would any officer involved in an investigation of this type involving a 3-year-old victim. Hopefully this, like Chief McGaw said, this brings some closure to the family that Mr. Wallace is off the street.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Major Cesar Pacheco, commander of the Criminal Investigations Division. With Mr. Wallace's apprehension, we enter into a new phase of the criminal investigation. It is, as we are far from having this investigation over. The detectives will be immediately acting and investigating, taking investigative steps to discover where Mr. Wallace has been, what his course of action has been during the time of his flight, and identifying any and all persons that may have rendered aid during his attempts to flee. Establishing a timeline with regard to his course of action will be one of the first priorities investigators pursue. With respect to any persons that are identified as aiders and abettors in Mr. Wallace's flight, circumstances regarding their involvement will be evaluated for the appropriate criminal charges. I would strongly encourage any and all persons that have had contact with Mr. Wallace to communicate with detectives from the Criminal Investigations Division before we have cause to come see you. As far as Mr. Wallace's status, he is held in Washington, D.C. Investigators will coordinate with officials from the District of Columbia to initiate the extradition processes that need to to occur. Investigators will continue to interview any and all persons involved with this investigation and gather evidence as appropriate in strengthening our criminal case. Thank you.
During the course of the investigation, our detectives have worked closely with the victim's family, and we wanted to offer the family members of Knijah the opportunity to come and talk to you. So both Knijah's mother and her grandmother have decided to be here today, and we'll begin with Ms. Davon Bibb, Knijah's mother.
Hello. This is very, very hard for me today, standing up here speaking, but I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been out there trying to help get my daughter's killer. I'm not happy about the situation, but I thank you guys for giving me closure, you know, knowing that he's behind bars where he belongs. I'll never be happy without my baby, but I just want to say thank you all for helping get the killer.
Hello, I'm Knijah's grandmother, Brenda. It's kind of hard, but I feel some closure, and I wish that he would get the worstest crime suffering that he could ever get through the system. Thank you.
Any questions?
What was his connection to that apartment building in Southeast? What was his connection to that apartment complex? And has anyone there been arrested?
The investigators are still working on the connection to the residence where he was located this morning. Individuals that were in that home are being interviewed at this time, so we'll try and determine those connections throughout the day.
And how was he found exactly?
Members from the Fugitive Squad were able to run down different leads and figure out that he was staying at a residence in D.C. They contacted Metropolitan Police Department, who made the apprehension this morning.
Was there a tip? And if so, is someone looking at reward money?
As the chief mentioned earlier, we received several tips. It's hard to say if any of those tips directly contributed to the apprehension, so that will have to be determined later on.
Did he resist at all?
From my understanding, I don't believe he resisted. No.
So was it he opened the door? Did somebody else open the door? And was this a swap maneuver to take him down, or was this just to simply knock on the door at you, Davon Wallace?
There were no SWAT or EST teams involved, but there was members from Metropolitan Police Department went to the address that our investigators led him to, and they were able to make the apprehension.
So did he admit that he was Davon Wallace in the scene?
Well, I can't go into anything that he said right at this time because the investigation is still pending.
Any idea how long he'd been there?
Our understanding, he's been there about approximately a week, and they're still trying to verify that, but we can't say for certain.
There was a comment made about other people who may have assisted him. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because it sounds like you all believe that there were people who were assisting him. We heard from residents in that community that they thought he was right there in that Landover community where the shooting happened and still hiding out there as short as a week ago. People saying that they had been seeing him.
Our working theory, as particularly right after the incident, was that he was still local. The circumstances of how he was able to avoid law enforcement for such a period of time and by itself suggests that he was receiving some sort of aid and assistance in some capacity. Those avenues are going to be explored, and at this point it would be preliminary or premature to say or evaluate exactly what it is or comment on exactly to what degree of assistance he'd been provided.
Could you all elaborate again on what these people are looking at, folks who may have been assisting him?
Well, they'd be looking at charges such as hindering. Depending on the circumstances of the aid they'd offered, we could explore accessory before and after the fact, harboring a fugitive, those types. But you really can't comment specifically on what particular type of charge that would require exploring exactly what the person did or did not do.
And what is Wallace being charged with again?
Oh, if I remember correctly, first and second degree murder. Yes.
Was he disheveled? Was he relaxed? What was his condition?
I mean, I don't have the specific information as to what he was wearing or anything like that, but it was early morning hours, so my assumption is he was, if awake, he hadn't been awake too long.
assume this photo is shot from today?
Yes.
When do you all expect to be back here for charges? Do you have a timeline yet?
Well, as I mentioned, extradition has procedures have to be put in place, and he has to be afforded an opportunity to either waive extradition or fight it. That's really gonna. It's hard to tell. It can take as little as a few days or as many as a few weeks. But we won't know until the proceeding actually begins.
The chief had made a comment a couple of weeks ago about this being one of the longest searches for someone in this kind of situation that you all have dealt with and who you were looking for. Can you talk just a little bit about that process and what it's like and the feeling of finally finding him after all of this effort?
Well, like I said before, and part of your question earlier, you don't disappear in this county for 38 days or in this area for 38 days without help. You just don't. You have to have, in my opinion, you have to have people coming, bringing you resources, bringing you clothing and different things. And that's why, we appreciate so much the help of the FBI, because at the beginning, we didn't know if he'd gone to North Carolina or maybe up to New Jersey, or he left the area. But you still don't, for 38 days, fall off the grid without someone helping you. And what I've asked the Criminal Investigation Division to do is, now that this piece, and this was our first priority, is finding Wallace. We found him now. I want a timeline of that 38 days, where he's been, who has helped him. And then we'll proceed, like we've talked about before, bringing charges to the people that need to be charged in this case. But as a department, like I said, and I opened with it, and specifically, there's very few things that will rattle a police department, especially a police department of this size. The loss, the death of an innocent child is certainly one that rattles the police department, and it rattled us. It rattled the entire community. And when you're searching for someone like this, day in, day out, you go to bed thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it. And one of the best calls I've had since being being the chief here was the call this morning that Wallace had been apprehended. So that's just some of the feelings that run through the entire department, not just me, and not just the investigators, but the entire department, the entire community.
Chief, what's your message to people who would help a fugitive that allegedly shot a little girl?
Like I said before, anyone, from my perspective, and I've had this conversation with the state's attorney, anyone who's helped this individual is going to get charged. It's unimaginable that people would support him and help him after this type of crime in the community. And we're going to put that timeline together, talk to everybody we need to, locate the people that helped him, stay away from prosecution, from being arrested, and we're going to bring charges to them.
And Chief, can you please reiterate his motive for going back to the house and firing that day?
And Ponch may be the best, but basically the premise is that he had an argument with someone in the house, a 16-year-old, over clothing. There was a fight, a physical fight. He leaves, comes back with a gun, and fires several shots into the house. But it's senseless, absolutely senseless. And at the end of that, the one who paid the price for it is a 3-year-old baby girl. So.
I have a question for the Bibbs, if that's okay.
For the Bibbs?
Oh, yeah, for the Bibbs. Oh, sorry. Just what was your reaction when you got that call telling you that he was in custody? What were your initial thoughts?
I started crying because I'm happy that he's caught, but I'm very, very sad because it still doesn't bring my daughter back, and that's all I really want, is to have my daughter back.
And I saw you, Mom, I saw you shaking your head and agreeing with the chief as he was talking about people who may have been assisting to hide him. What are your thoughts when you hear about people in that community?
I would think that people would be so hard-hearted to actually hide somebody that took an innocent baby that had no defense at all. She just didn't deserve that. She was no part of what was going on. So how could you hide them? Like, people was talking trash on Facebook. You know, and I think that everybody, like the chief said, everybody that was involved should be charged with a sentence. Should do some jail time. That's just charged. They should get some jail time. I don't want them on probation. They should need to be in jails behind bars so they can suffer with their buddies since they want to be his friend at hiding.